Does this strange 11,000-year-old deer skull have links to a British Atlantis?
All of a sudden we have this data which is giving us an impression of this lost landscape.
Is this ancient relic the work of a prehistoric astronomer?
Is it just a decorative disc, or is there some hidden meaning?
And did this weird contraption really shape the modern world?
Honestly, it looks like something invented by a steampunk scientist.
These are the most remarkable and mysterious objects on Earth. Hidden away in museums, laboratories, and storage rooms. Now, new research and technology can get under their skin like never before. We can rebuild them, pull them apart, and zoom in to reveal the unbelievable, the ancient, and the truly bizarre. These are the world's strangest things. In the Yorkshire Museum is a truly ancient artifact created by humans in the unimaginably distant past, the end of the Ice Age, 11,000 years ago.
If you think about going back to the pyramids of Giza and then going back another pyramids of Giza amount of time, you still wouldn't be 11,000 years ago. It's a vast amount of time.
Now, using cutting-edge technology, we can bring it into the light. Close examination reveals the skull has been drastically altered. Strange holes have been cut into it.
These holes are made artificially in very selective points on the skull.
The antlers have been cut down and honed. The bony protrusions inside have been removed. This may have started out as the skull of a deer, but people have worked it into something far stranger.
It's been carefully trimmed and carefully perforated.
The changes might be dismissed as some bizarre combination of natural processes if this skull were unique.
This isn't just a one-off. There are 33 of these red deer skulls which show exactly the same patterns of working and manufacture.
Who made it? What is it for? And what secrets does it hold about humanity's distant past? Northern England, 1948. Archaeologists unearth a prehistoric site called Star Carr in North Yorkshire. Because of the acidic peat soil of an ancient lake bed, a lost world, 11,000 years old, has been preserved.
We don't just get the stone tools, we get the organic materials, so the bone, the wood. It's incredible that we get so much material, such a breadth of material preserved that just doesn't normally survive for these vast amounts of time.
And one group of finds in particular captivates the experts. To a layperson, this just looks like a deer skull. So why does it shock the archaeological world?
It's been worked. It's been reduced in size around the base of the horns. It's been manufactured.
And when experts try to reproduce the process used to create this eerie skull, they discover that it's far from simple, using only Stone Age technology.
This is a time before metal tools. This is a time before drills.
The process starts off with the reduction of antlers. Then it looks as if the frontal bones and the lower jaw and the lower part of the brain case are removed quite carefully in a very specific way.
This is done by wrapping the bone they want to keep in clay. The skull is then heated in a fire. The exposed bone becomes brittle and can be broken off. And the process doesn't stop there.
We get these holes which are made artificially in very selective points on the skull. It's done with a pointed stone, or a flint axe perhaps.
Each deer skull takes hours, even days of meticulous work. It's not a level of craftsmanship experts expected to find on an 11,000-year-old site. Because back then, just surviving this far north is an achievement.
The temperature then would have been about 8 degrees Celsius colder on average than today. It would have been difficult just finding food. Spending a lot of time working on a deer skull might not have been the most practical thing to do with your time. So, this must have been important to them.
What is this weird skull for? The answer may lie in a closer examination. A natural deer skull has sharp, bony ridges inside. This one does not.
Some of the knobbly protuberances on the inside of the skull, they've been smoothed away.
Along with the holes cut into it, archaeologists now believe this can explain what it's for.
They've been modified specifically with the intention of them being worn on the head. Perforations are created in order to allow strapping or webbing to be passed over the skull and under the chin of someone who wanted to wear them.
So are we simply looking at some kind of Ice Age hat? Or does it have a deeper purpose?
The original interpretations focused on the idea of them being hunting aids or hunting disguises, and that people were donning the antlers and skulls of deer to improve their chances of success in hunting.
We know that this was a practice of Native Americans. For example, in California in historic times, the last of the great Yahi hunters, Ishi, explained how he used to wear such a crown of deer antlers in order to attract the interest of white-tailed deer.
But at Star Car, archaeologists run into a problem with the camouflage theory. If the skulls recovered from the ancient lake bed are simply utility items for hunting, you'd expect them to be used until they wear out or break.
These headdresses were in perfectly good condition when they were put into the lake. You have to ask, why throw away a perfectly good headdress?
It looks as if they're being placed deliberately in the open water areas as part of some form of ritual.
What is the purpose of this ritual? And why is the deer skull so important to it?
One hint might come from Upper Paleolithic rock art, recorded in the cave of Trois Frères in the Pyrenees. What looks to be a man wearing a deer suit, perhaps even in the course of transforming into a deer, or simply dancing wearing such a costume.
Similar horned figures appear throughout ancient history, across many cultures, from Italy to Denmark and France. What are these monstrous figures? Are they connected to the Star Car skulls? Could these be legendary devil priests? This 11,000-year-old deer skull headdress is strikingly similar to ancient images found across the world. What does it all mean? The answer may lie in a more recent image of life on the Russian steppes.
Half a world away in Siberia, an engraving from 1692 showing a man wearing a similar set of antlers.
This image comes with a caption in Dutch: shaman, or devil priest. It leads archaeologists to an extraordinary conclusion.
The current thinking for the headdresses is that they represent one of the earliest examples we have in the archaeological record for a shaman's costume, which allows the wearer to transform their identity to become something which isn't perhaps all human, something which blurs the characteristics of red deer and people together in an unusual way and creates this cosmologically different kind of being.
The presence of these skulls at Star Car 11,000 years ago suggests it's a center of shamanic religious worship. And they appear connected with other similar images scattered across Europe and Siberia. But Siberia and Yorkshire are separated by over 2,500 miles of land and sea. Is a connection even possible? Or is this just a figment of overactive archaeological imagination? In 1931, a crew of English trawlermen land an unexpected catch. A huge lump of what's known as moor log.
So it's this big lump of wood that's been trawled from the bottom of the North Sea, and it's got mud and it's got bits of stuff stuck to it. And one of the things that comes off is this artifact, this spear point made from red deer antler, which is remarkably similar to many of the spear points we find at Star Car.
But is that just coincidental? It's over 60 years before the apparent link between the moor log, the strange images scattered across the world, and the skull headdress becomes clear.
It's only with the discovery of oil and the use of sonar mapping to really generate a high-resolution understanding of what the bottom of the North Sea actually looks like that we suddenly realise as archaeologists that there is this complete lost landscape there.
Archaeologists discover a lost world. A rural Atlantis connecting Britain to continental Europe, now submerged beneath the North Sea. This European Atlantis is named Doggerland, after a famous seafloor mound.
All of a sudden we have this data which is giving us an impression of this lost landscape, so valleys, riverbeds, estuaries, and miles and miles and miles of land which is populated by hunter-gatherers during the Mesolithic and the early Stone Age.
How does this spectacular landscape end up at the bottom of the sea?
During the Ice Age periods when the ice is trapped in the caps, the level of the sea is lowered, and these shallow pieces of land that are just beneath the sea today are actually then exposed on the surface. They become vegetated, they get eroded by rainwater into rivers, and they become areas for settlements.
This lost land bridge between Britain and Europe finally connects the Deer People images across the globe with the headdress at Star Car.
The large expanse of Doggerland allowed people to move around the wider European landscape. And if people are moving around, so are ideas.
So there is very little reason that the concept of shamanism, those kinds of ideas and those kinds of beliefs, couldn't have travelled with people across Doggerland and made their way to what we know as Britain today at the time that Star Car is being occupied.
The Star Car skulls are not only proof of astonishingly ancient religious practices, they are also evidence that this 11,000-year-old spiritual culture is far more complex and widespread than we could ever have imagined. In a German museum sits a priceless and unique object. It looks like a modern emoticon, but it's actually an ancient artifact. Now, using the latest technology, we can reveal it in all its glory. The Nebra Sky Disk.
It's made out of gold and bronze. It's relatively heavy, and it's a very, very beautiful artifact. Really beautiful.
Measuring 12 inches in diameter, it's believed to be more than 3,500 years old.
And on it is a series of what looks like astronomical objects, possibly the sun, the moon, cluster of stars, and then it has some gold arcs.
But could it be more than a piece of elaborate decoration?
Does it mean something? Do the markings on the disc actually represent something?
What looked like the sun, moon, and stars might make it one of the most ancient images of the cosmos ever.
nobody, not one archaeologist, would have expected such a find, not in Egypt, not in Mesopotamia, and absolutely not in the heart of Europe.
Is this the work of an advanced culture in the center of Bronze Age Europe? What do these symbols mean? Are they proof of some kind of secret knowledge? Or is this all just an elaborate hoax conjured up by looters? Because the discovery of the disc is a genuine true crime story. The Nebra Sky Disk. How does this strange artifact wind up at the center of a major police operation? May 2001. Archaeologist Harold Meller is shown a photograph of a Bronze Age hoard. It includes chisels, swords, jewelry, and something he's never seen before. A strange disc decorated with gold.
It appears to show on it the sun, crescent moon, a series of crescents, and then a series of stars all picked out in really vibrant gold work. It's completely unique in terms of the European Bronze Age. It almost defies belief as a find. It's really remarkable and it's really, really striking.
On closer inspection, it seems to be more than just a pretty picture of the night sky.
If you just have a general look at the disc, you see all these different symbols, but something stood out, and it's a cluster of 7 stars.
Comparing the arrangement of these stars against known constellations suggests one strong candidate.
It's thought the 7 stars represent an actual star cluster in the sky called the Pleiades.
Meller realizes that if it is genuine, the disk represents one of the oldest images of the cosmos ever discovered, an ancient star chart.
It was absolutely clear that this item, if it is really early Bronze Age, this would be one of the most important finds of the world.
But in 2001, when Meller is shown the photo of this unique object, it isn't in a museum. It's for sale on the black market.
I was really shocked. This crucial find was in the hand of looters. Shocked and angry because we can't touch it, we can't do research on it.
If it goes to a private buyer, it could be lost forever. Believing it could be genuine, Meller tracks the stolen artifacts for months. In February 2002, posing as a buyer, he arranges a meet in a Swiss hotel.
The man who had the disc had it in a towel under his shirt. So he opened the shirt and showed me the disc.
But Meller hasn't come alone. As soon as the disc exchanges hands, the Swiss police pounce.
The police do a very, very good job. And this was a really, really exciting police thing like in a TV thriller.
Afterwards, the archaeologists and the police trace back the disc to 2 treasure hunters.
They claim to have found the disc in the Ziegelrode forest in Germany, near the tiny settlement of Nebra, and sold the hoard to a dealer in Rhineland for $16,500. They have no idea that the disc alone could be worth almost 700 times that amount, $11 million. But its unique appearance and criminal origins make its authenticity questionable.
Any such object that comes out of an illicit operation, a sting operation, also the art market, it is something that is very hard to determine if it is a fake object, if it is a hoax, or if it is a real thing. This is a fundamental problem that confronts Meller.
So, is the Nebra Sky Disk an ancient artifact that could revolutionize our understanding of a lost culture? Or is it a fraud, cooked up by the criminal underworld? Now he's got his hands on the hoard, Meller can finally try to get to the truth by figuring out how old the disc really is. But that's a tough ask.
We can't carbon date it because it doesn't have anything organic to it to date from. So we need to date it by association with the other objects that it was found with.
It's not so easy to date the chisel and not so easy to date the arm rings, but it's really easy for archaeologists to date the swords.
The style and how they were made pointed to a particular culture, the Unetis culture. And they were one of the first people in Europe to use bronze.
From around 2300 to 1600 BCE, the Unetis culture occupies much of Central Europe. This gives Meller a 700-year window for the age of the swords. And closer examination narrows the timeline further. He finds minute traces of wood.
In one of the handles we found pieces of birch, and it was able to take a radiocarbon date from it. So we know that the hoard was deposited around 1600.
1600 BCE is a perfect match to the Unetis culture. If it really is 3,600 years old, the sky disk is one of the most ancient representations of the night sky ever discovered. Even older than any known Egyptian star chart. So the archaeological stakes are high. But the only proof that the disk and swords belong together is the word of criminals. Can Meller prove it's really this old? Or will it turn out to be a sophisticated fake? The Nebra sky disk, an ancient relic that could send shockwaves through our understanding of the Bronze Age world. But only if it's real. Swords said to have been found with it are dated to 1600 BCE. But the only proof that they belong together is the word of criminals.
The swords were real, but the question is, was the disc really found next to the swords?
How do we know that it's not something that's just been added, something modern, something fake that's been added to an authentic collection of swords?
One of the things that makes the disc look old is the green corrosion covering it.
This green corrosion is called verdigris, and it's formed from copper, which is the principal component of bronze. And it's formed when that copper reacts with water and the atmosphere to create copper carbonate, which are these beautiful blue-green crystals on the surface of bronze. You see this greening on statues, like the Statue of Liberty is green for this same reason.
A prominent German archaeologist suggests the disc's verdigris could have been faked using urine. To find the truth, scientists examine the disc using an electron microscope to measure the size of the disc's verdigris crystals.
In a genuine artifact, what you see is a smaller number of very large crystals that have had that time to grow, whereas in a faked artifact, you'll see a much larger number, but of very, very small crystals. The verdigris crystals on the sky disk are small in number and large in size, and all of this is consistent with an artifact that has been lying around for around 3,500 years. So we know from these crystals that this isn't a fake.
The science suggests the disc is so old, it predates the reign of Tutankhamun. But is it just ancient decoration? Or is it meant to do something more practical? What is it for? One clue may lie in the decorative gold patterns. Experts suspect this cluster of stars are a depiction of a real constellation, the Pleiades.
This might be significant because the Pleiades are one of the constellations that we don't see throughout the year in the Northern Hemisphere. They appear around autumn time, around harvest time, and they disappear from view around spring. It might be showing when to plant crops, showing when to harvest crops.
And the Pleiades may not be the only astronomical reference on the sky disk. Along one edge is a gold arc, and it's clear that there was once an identical arc on the opposite edge.
if you take the location where the disk was found, they seem to match up with the position of the summer solstice and the winter solstice, so a difference of about 82 degrees.
So it's thought that these arcs were used as a kind of measurement device that would allow you to work out what the time of year was based on the position that the sun rises on the horizon.
The angles of the gold arcs could be coincidence, except for one rather incredible discovery. Gozikenge.
In 1991, a huge archaeological find was made just 15 miles away from where the disk had been found. And it's a giant prehistoric earthworks, a structure that was probably used as some kind of astronomical calendar.
Archaeologists uncover the remains of a wooden circular structure, roughly 240 feet in diameter, comprised of 4 concentric circles.
A particularly important feature of Gozikenge is 2 gates that are the same angle apart as those arcs on the sky disk.
Gozikenge is believed to date back to 4,900 BCE, over 3,000 years before the sky disk is created. It suggests that this is genuine astronomical knowledge, and it has been passed down for countless generations. And of course, it's not the only henge in existence.
Perhaps the most famous henge in the world is Stonehenge in the UK. And its most famous function is that on the summer and winter solstices, the sun rises in a very particular position between the stones.
Could all these similarities provide a clue to the sky disk's true purpose?
Obviously, something like Stonehenge is not very portable. You can't exactly slip it in your pocket and make a few quick calculations about your crops. So perhaps the Nebra sky disk serves as a more portable, functional version of these giant prehistoric structures.
What we see is scientists in these times, people who wanted to know something about the universe.
The celestial calendar makes perfect sense, but it doesn't explain everything about the disk. Because there's a third golden arc, added sometime after the disk is made, and this can't be explained by an astronomical theory. So what is it? Two gold arcs on either side suggest the Nebra sky disk is a portable cosmic calendar. But the strange third arc below can't be explained by astronomy.
One particular theory argues that this is possibly a sun barge.
The idea of the sun traveling across the sky, or gods moving the sun across the sky, is one that's common to a number of civilizations. For the ancient Greeks, Helios, the sun god, would travel across the sky in a horse-drawn chariot.
For the ancient Egyptians, the bark of Ra is a vessel which sails across the sky carrying the sun god, Ra. The similarities with the disk seem clear. Experts believe this is the best explanation we have for the strange third arc. But could religious ideas from such distant cultures really have reached as far as the Central European Bronze Age? The answer may lie within the disk itself.
So when they looked at the lead isotopes in the copper, which is the main constituent of the bronze, the lead isotope fingerprint matched a site on the far east of the Alps.
The decorative metals are even more surprising. The gold from the arc on the side of the disk is traced to the Carpathian Basin in Romania. But the gold in the sun, moon, and stars proves harder to pin down. Dr. Gregor Borg samples and compares gold deposits from across Europe.
Of something like 270 locations all over Europe that we had to exclude as a source, Cornwall is the only region until now that we have found where the composition of the gold matches the composition of the gold of the sky disk of Nebra.
It's a remarkable discovery. The distance between Cornwall and the Eastern Alps, where the copper is sourced, is almost 1,000 miles.
The sky disk of Nebra is showing us that the Bronze Age people were traveling across Europe at that time. They had trade connections. There was a united Europe already 1,600 years BC. Isn't that amazing?
So the idea that religious beliefs about the sun could have been exchanged with the Unetis from widely separated cultures doesn't seem quite so hard to swallow. We may never know the full story of the Nebra sky disk. Is it a spiritual symbol, a cosmic calendar, or perhaps both? What the disk does show us is that ancient cultures that could easily be dismissed as primitive were in fact far more sophisticated than we had ever realized.
What's absolutely incredible about this tiny object, whatever it really represents, is that it shows us that people, even thousands of years ago, were practicing astronomy. They were looking to the skies, they were understanding the movements of the sun and the stars, and how they related to phenomena that were happening down here on Earth. It really was one of the earliest true sciences.
In the depths of London's Science Museum is a bizarre contraption from the late 1800s. It looks like a school science project gone wrong, but nothing could be further from the truth. This strange thing changes everything around us.
There's almost nothing you'd see, hear, or touch that hasn't been affected by the development of this device.
Now we can bring this antique to life once again. This is Fleming's diode. Standing just 9 inches tall, it is a spidery gadget of glass and wire.
You can see a wire filament and a plate embedded within a glass tube, and it's the combination of metals and glass that actually creates a very beautiful physical structure.
When you turn it on, it seems to come to life.
It has a beautiful property where it glows like an incandescent lamp.
But it looks more like Dr. Frankenstein's idea of a light bulb. A contact pierces the glass bubble, connecting to a thin sheet of metal close to the glowing filament. It's designed simply to improve primitive radio, but it accidentally starts a world-changing technological revolution that's still going on today. Why is it created? How does it work? How does it end up transforming everything? Fleming's diode. This strange device is a worldwide game changer. But that is almost an accident, because it isn't created to do that. In the second half of the 19th century, the first transatlantic telegraph cables connect North America and Europe. For the first time, nations can talk to each other instantaneously across thousands of miles of ocean. But this revolution has a weakness. It must be hardwired. Cables are expensive, prone to failure, and messages can only be sent between fixed points. Ships at sea, for example, are completely deaf and dumb. But in a German laboratory, a scientific experiment is about to spark a sea change. In 1887, physicist Heinrich Hertz uses a spark to generate electromagnetic waves, what will come to be called radio waves. These create another spark in a receiver several feet away. There's nothing in between but thin air. It's like magic.
The thought was that electricity required to flow through a wire. So this notion that we could actually have electricity flow without the wire was a completely new concept.
It opens up a seemingly impossible idea: communication without wires. But Hertz's scientific experiment only works over distances of a few feet. On its own, it will never change the world. One man more than any other transforms the dream of wireless communication into a reality. a young Italian engineer called Guglielmo Marconi. Over the next decade, he makes huge leaps in the evolution of radio. In 1899, Marconi's radio saves its first lives. A lightship in the English Channel transmits the world's first distress signal, alerting coast guards to a stricken vessel. But Marconi is thinking big. He wants radio to cross the Atlantic, and his receiver cannot detect radio over that distance. So he devises a more sensitive detector, but it has its own issues.
It still wasn't quite perfect because it was basically built on clockwork.
Which means it has to be wound up by hand.
And if the radio operator forgot to wind it up, of course, the system wouldn't work anymore.
Marconi wants to eliminate the mechanical element and, critically, improve sensitivity even further, because more sensitivity equals more reliable reception and a bigger range. Enter John Ambrose Fleming, a scientist working for Marconi. This spider-like object is what he comes up with. But how does this weird little contraption get the whole world talking? Fleming takes an entirely novel approach to detecting radio. His device doesn't just sense the radio signal, it manipulates it.
So the way it works in a radio, when you receive a radio signal, the radio signal is going backwards and forwards, positive, negative, very, 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 very rapidly. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times a second.
This makes it impossible to directly measure the electrical signal from the aerial. Because the change of direction is so rapid that the needle of any meter measuring it doesn't even begin to move before the current reverses. The needle appears stationary, so you cannot tell that there is a radio signal at all. Fleming's device, also known as a thermionic diode, solves the problem by chopping the radio signal in two.
A thermionic diode allows current to flow in one direction, but not to flow in the opposite direction.
When Fleming's device is fitted into the radio receiver, only the electricity flowing in one direction gets through. The needle doesn't get pulled back to zero by the reversing current, so the detector can register the signal, and a message sent from thousands of miles away can be received. But how does it pull off this strange trick with the current? The secret to the thermionic diode lies within the glass shell. Sitting in the vacuum is a thin filament that glows red hot. Close to it is a thin metal plate. The magic happens in the space between them. And it's all based on one of science's biggest, or rather smallest, discoveries of all time. 1897, Cambridge. The world of science is awash with new rays. Not just radio and X-rays, but a mysterious new one called the cathode ray.
A physicist called J.J. Thomson was studying cathode rays, and what he discovered was that these weren't actually rays at all, but they were tiny, tiny particles.
At the time, scientists believed there is nothing in the universe smaller than a hydrogen atom. But what Thomson finds is much, much smaller.
These particles had a mass about 1,000th of a hydrogen atom.
It's a scientific revolution. Atoms are no longer the smallest objects in the universe. And these newly discovered and mind-bogglingly small particles, named electrons, are the key to Fleming's device. It begins with the red-hot filament.
When you heat up the metal, the electrons effectively start boiling off the surface.
Electrons are negatively charged, and Fleming's gadget relies on the fact that opposite charges attract.
If you put a metal plate near it that's positively charged, those electrons are drawn off to it quite effectively. So you get current flow because electrons carry current and they're all rushing at this metal plate.
But the current cannot flow the other way.
If you swap the charges round and make the plate negative, the electrons wouldn't flow because they're negatively charged, so they would be repelled from the plate.
And that is how the Fleming valve works.
What you end up with is a device that only allows electricity to flow in one direction.
By the early 20th century, the radio signal that 25 years earlier leapt just a few feet now crosses oceans and continents. That's the problem Fleming's strange-looking glass spider helped solve. It was never intended to shape so much of the world we know today. Why was its impact so accidentally profound?
It's the first electronic device. It's the beginning of the electronic revolution. Before that, we've got motors, we've got lights, it's got light bulbs, you've got switches, but essentially you can turn things on and off. You can't really manipulate the way the current behaves in a complicated way.
During the next decade, diodes grow a third wire. Now, tiny changes in the voltage of this third connection can change a large current flowing inside the device. It transforms these glass spiders.
And what that is an amplifier. You think about what you can do with an amplifier. Before, everything is dots and dashes in Morse code. Now I can send speech. I can send music. I can make talking pictures.
The movies talk.
It has a profound impact.
It becomes the foundation of much of the modern world around us.
Television, computers, radios, mobile phones, the internet, it's all built on electronics. None of it could exist without electronics. The creation of this diode starts this electronics revolution, and that's a revolution that's still going on today.